other countries said, okay, we are happy with this weak version, but then the EU and some other countries said, no, it's far too weak and we want a stronger version. So on Principle 10 we now have 3 paragraphs sort of remaining, one which is complete deletion, one which is weak chair's text proposal, and one which is proposal for stronger text from specifically the EU. So I thought that's an important issue we all might want to be aware about. We're also sitting in that room.
Oh yeah, Tom Jacob from the
Fascinated by the group.
Pardon me?
You were fascinated by the discussion, I can say.
Yeah, well, yes, as always. I guess the only thing I'd add is just that with respect to this discussion about the byplay between the G77 and others, in comparing notes, I sense that it wasn't as dramatic or sort of borderline confrontational as it was in the group 3 and 5. But if you look at the text that Chantal forwarded this morning, you see that selectively there are still G77 original paras referenced in there, and while they were more accommodating and willing to try to integrate their important points into the chair's text in most paras, there were some where they said that they continued to favor working off of their G77 submission. And in those cases, you'll see their paras from the former draft integrated as well, but it's still cut down a lot.
Oh, Nadine has a question. Well, it's more of a comment. Does everybody understand why we're talking about the co-chair's text versus, because we didn't really explain that for people that may not be as used to the process. Remember last time we ended this process with about 200 and some pages of text because there was all this addition. So it was a very hard negotiation to allow the co-chair to provide alternative text. And this is the blue text. And then the question yesterday was, can we agree to start negotiation with the blue text, or do we keep going with all these alternatives that we have? And so in one group they said yes, in the other group they said no. And then basically, even when they said yes, they still went back to some of the black text and mix and match it. And now it looks like they're going to match completely in the other one. But at least it's a step forward because some of the paras, some of the consolidation was made. I just want to make sure everybody's on the same page on this.
If there are any questions about this, just raise your hand and we'll discuss that. The other issue I found, I only was there in the evening, so I was not there in the morning. But another important issue was that text on women was taken out by G77, so we were unhappy about that, with the argument that they would prefer to see all text on women and gender in only one subparagraph in chapter 5. Just for you to be aware of. And are there any other report backs? Yeah, maybe from there.
Just a question for Chantal. That's right. My name is Helena Ward with an NGO. Can you explain how the judgment process works for the co-chairs in deciding whether to propose co-chairs text or not? Because there are some sections where the co-chairs said we weren't able to propose text. And what do they consider in deciding whether to do that or not?
Yeah, and that's a very good question. And so this is something that, in Rio, I really suggest everybody attend the training we're going to give. Because this is what we do in the training capacity building workshop we gave yesterday. We go over this. So in Rio, it will be very important for everybody to come. We'll give a few of them. So if the one at a time doesn't work, so it works with the other time, we'll send you in advance the time. Basically, in general, if you want to put it broad brush, wherever it's clear there's no consensus, the co-chair did not even bother trying to propose text because it's clear the negotiations are not there yet. There needs to be much more talking amongst member states and amongst the political group to see where the water is heading before you can put something. Because remember, the whole idea was you need to be pretty sure of where everybody stands and going to feel comfortable enough with starting with that text, otherwise they reject the whole text to negotiate with it. That's what happened with the green economy text. The G77 did not feel comfortable, they didn't want to use it. So you don't have any co-chair text in all of the IFSD section. Should we have an upgrade of UNAP, a creation of the council? Because there was no clear way, you don't see a trend where there's a consensus going to somewhere. Also, the way it works is we with the secretary with the co-chair helped prepare a first draft, and then basically the political group were consulted. It's not like you put it up in the plenary without consulting, so they did sit with the G77, with the EU, with the JustScan, and basically aired it out and said, okay, does that sound, and then made some changes and then proposed it to the plenary to increase the chances, and then despite that, they didn't accept it, the Green Economy Task.
I have a question about that, Chantilly, because they did not discuss UNEP, the Council for Sustainable Development, or the upgraded ECOSOC. How are they
Well, they
going?
discussed it already. They just didn't propose a text.
Yes, I mean, the chair asked, well, are there, any proposals on this part, and there were none. So they just went,
Yeah.
they skipped the entire part, right? Sort of.
Well,
At least the important
what the chair
parts.
asked for was any suggestions on how to handle it.
Right.
And he did in fact get 2 suggestions from Switzerland and Mexico, that the way to handle that would be not to focus on the text, but for those people that have notions that they want to advance, to talk conceptually about those so that everybody gets up to speed about what people are talking about. Then the suggestion was they would be in a better position to talk about the text. And I think I think the chair took that, and there were no other suggestions, but I think that's the route that they will go. But having had that preliminary discussion, then they moved on to continue trying to move through and get the initial edits on the chair's text. That was my sense of it.
Okay, so the proposals will come from the chairs now, or from the member states on this one?
Well, honestly, this is a political process. At the Bureau meeting on Sunday, it was decided that the chair's text will be used. And in the plenary yesterday,
No, but on this
so-
part, there was no chairs.
I know. So basically, it's gonna be an hybrid. They're gonna go to the text, but also bilaterally in the corridor, there will be some work done to try. Maybe, Farouk, it would be a good time for people that were not there yesterday. You explain kind of the switch in gear that happened with the SD Council and why there's no proposal, or do you feel comfortable just in the 2 minutes to say?
Well, I can say what, I mean, I know, I can't say that this is the complete accurate story behind it. But I mean, I can only say that from the point of the zero draft, when there was quite a lot of strong support for Sustainable Development Council. Since then, some of the countries, including the ALBA countries, have kind of come up with a counter proposal about how the reforming of ECOSOC might be a better option for what is ultimately the highest level body for sustainable development in the UN system. The idea being that there is a tension of efficiency within the system, and that creating a Sustainable Development Council which is separate from ECOSOC would ultimately hamstring ECOSOC, and then you have a split of resources. That's not necessarily the most efficient option. Instead, there might be a more elegant solution, which is by putting reforms in place for ECOSOC, which would allow it to hold some kind of SD assembly or council as well, so that the 2 things aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, but could be done as one. In this case, you would sort of allow ECOSOC you empower ECOSOC to deliver on sustainable development without necessarily requiring a separate body, but not necessarily necessitating a charter change either, which few people have the stomach for at the moment. So I think that the Mexicans, along with others, are considering this stuff. You have to bear in mind, however, that the Mexicans have a bit of a vested interest in this, as they will be the new presidency for ECOSOC. So of course, well, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm just saying. However, there are interesting proposals. I think they're worth considering. At the moment, we are working with some partners to produce a functions paper, which removes the form altogether. So it doesn't presume one form for how you would do this, but just focuses on whatever functions are necessary or the non-negotiables for a new highest level SD body, without giving it a name or saying it's ECOSOC or anything else. And we're going to present this paper on Sunday at our workshop with IFSD. We have the Mexicans there on the panel, as well as other governments as well. So hopefully there'll be a more in-depth discussion about these issues, where we can hopefully use an offline process to add a bit of clarity to the actual formal process. So when they come back on Monday and next week, we'll have a bit of a clearer view of what could be an ideal or more ideal proposal.
And the proposal as it stands now is labeled Cuba, right? Or is that again another one?
I think that's just the Cuban view on it. I don't know about the exact text. I mean, there's all sorts of different amendments in there at the moment, so it's not one thing or the other.
Do have a look at Cuba. Search. Yes.
I had a question, Chantaline. What do you think is going to happen? I mean, we've been going through this text again and again, and every time, you know, there are new additions, etc. How are we on earth going to whittle it down to something that we can get done in Rio? We're not going to get it done this time. We have another prep con in May, and then what's going to happen?
God knows.
Yeah.
Because I think there seems to be an assumption that some days will be added. There's some countries that are totally against that. They're like, this is the 13 days we have, and this is the 13 days we're going to use. And therefore, there's some real concern out there that if things don't get in gear soon, we're not going to get a text in time.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, I can't tell you. It's time to put pressure on governments to member states to get things done. We have 12 days of negotiation left.
Farouk?
Just on